Before Norway had its own coins, the Vikings had a fascinating and practical way of handling money. They operated within what we now call a silver economy. This wasn't about coins with a king's face on them, but about the raw weight and purity of the silver itself. Vikings were incredible traders, sailors, and adventurers, and their journeys took them far and wide from the coasts of England to the markets of Baghdad. As they traded goods like furs, timber, and amber, they received payment in silver. This silver came in many forms: beautiful jewelry like arm rings and necklaces, intricate ornaments, and even pieces of raw, unworked metal known as ingots. The value was purely in the metal, not in the object's form. This system was incredibly flexible. Imagine a Viking trader making a deal. If a silver arm ring was worth more than the goods he was buying, he wouldn't hesitate to take out his knife and simply chop a piece off. This practice gave us the term hack silver or hack silver. Archaeologists have found enormous hoards of this chopped-up silver buried all across Scandinavia and the British Isles. These hoards are like a snapshot of Viking wealth, containing a jumble of silver fragments from different objects and places. It was a very physical and tangible form of wealth. You could feel the weight of your money in your hands, a direct measure of your prosperity and power in a society that valued strength and success. Among the treasures found in these Viking hoards are countless foreign coins. The Vikings didn't mint their own coins yet, but they were more than happy to use those made by others. The most common were English silver pennies, especially those from the reigns of Anglo-Saxon kings like Ethelred the Unready. These coins were highly valued for their consistent silver content. Vikings also acquired Arabic dirhams from their trade routes that stretched eastwards through Russia. These Islamic coins, often decorated with beautiful calligraphy, were prized for their purity. Finding these coins in Norway tells a story of a connected world, where silver traveled thousands of miles to end up in a Viking's purse. This reliance on bullion and foreign currency worked well for centuries, but it had its limitations. Weighing and testing silver for every transaction could be slow and cumbersome. It also required everyone to carry scales and to trust the purity of the metal being offered. As Viking society grew more organized and centralized under powerful chieftains and early kings, the need for a more standardized and controllable form of money became clear. The idea of a local currency, stamped with the authority of a Norwegian ruler, began to take shape. This would not only simplify trade but also serve as a powerful symbol of a unified and independent kingdom, a concept that was just beginning to emerge from the fragmented world of Viking chiefdoms. The story of Norway's first coin begins with one of the most famous figures in Viking history, King Olaf Tryggvason. Olaf was a larger-than-life character, a Viking warrior who had traveled the world before returning to claim the throne of Norway in the year 995. He was a man with a grand vision. His primary goal was to unite Norway under his rule and, crucially, to convert his people to Christianity. To achieve this, he needed powerful symbols of his authority. He needed to show everyone that he was the one and only king, and that a new era had begun. Minting a coin was a brilliant way to do just that, a piece of political propaganda that could travel to every corner of his kingdom. Around the year 995, King Olaf ordered the creation of the very first Norwegian coin. This was a silver penning, or penny, modeled directly on the English pennies he would have been familiar with from his time spent in England. This was no accident. The English currency was respected and trusted, so copying its style was a smart move to ensure his own coins would be accepted by the people. The coin was a clear and powerful statement. On one side, it featured a portrait of the king himself. This was revolutionary for Norway. Instead of just a piece of silver, people now held a coin with the face of their ruler, a constant reminder of his power and presence in their daily lives. The other side of the coin was just as significant. It was stamped with a Christian cross. This was a direct message about Olaf's other great project, the Christianization of Norway. By putting a cross on his money, he was weaving the new faith into the very fabric of the economy. Every time a person used one of these coins to buy food or pay a tax, they were handling a symbol of both the king's power and the Christian church. It was a way of making his political and religious ambitions part of everyday life. This first penning was more than just money. It was a tool for building a nation and spreading a new religion across a land steeped in Norse paganism. These first coins were struck in very limited numbers and were not a fully developed national currency just yet. The old system of weighing silver and using foreign coins continued alongside them for a long time. However, the importance of Olaf Tryggvason's penning cannot be overstated. It marked a pivotal moment in Norwegian history. It was the first time a Norwegian ruler had claimed the exclusive right to issue money, a fundamental power of any state. He had taken a concept from abroad and adapted it for his own purposes, creating a potent symbol of a new, unified, and Christian Norway. This small piece of silver laid the foundation for a national coinage that would evolve over the next 1,000 years. Throughout the medieval period, Norwegian coinage continued to develop, though it was often a turbulent and inconsistent process. Following Olaf Tryggvason's lead, subsequent kings like Harald Hardrada, another famous Viking who fought all the way to Constantinople, also minted their own silver pennies. These coins became the backbone of the Norwegian economy for centuries. The designs often followed a similar pattern, the king's portrait or symbol on one side, and a Christian cross on the other. This combination reinforced the powerful alliance between the monarchy and the church, showing the people that the king's rule was supported by divine authority. The coins were a tangible link between the ruler and his subjects. The quality and availability of these silver pennies, however, could vary dramatically. The supply of silver in Norway was not always stable, and the political situation was often chaotic with different claimants fighting for the throne. This led to periods where the silver content in the coins was reduced, a process known as debasement. Sometimes other metals like copper were mixed in to make the silver go further. This often led to a loss of public trust in the currency. If people couldn't be sure of a coin's true silver value, they might revert to the old ways of weighing metal, or prefer to use more reliable foreign coins, especially those from Denmark or Germany, which were becoming more common through trade. A significant change occurred in the 13th century under King Håkon Håkonsson. During his long and relatively stable reign, the coinage system became more organized and centralized. However, it was his successor who introduced a major shift. To deal with a chronic shortage of silver, the crown began issuing pennies made almost entirely of copper instead of silver. This was a hugely unpopular move. People were used to their money having intrinsic value based on the precious metal it contained. A copper coin had very little metal value, so its spending power relied entirely on the king's decree. This was a difficult concept for many to accept, and it created economic challenges and discontent among the population. This period also saw increasing influence from outside Norway, particularly from Denmark. As political ties between the Scandinavian kingdoms grew stronger, more Danish coins flowed into Norway. The designs of Norwegian coins began to show this influence, sometimes adopting similar symbols or styles. This was a sign of things to come. The era of a purely distinct Norwegian coinage was slowly coming to an end. The nation was being drawn into a closer orbit with its powerful southern neighbor, and this political reality would soon be reflected very clearly in the metal that people carried in their pockets, foreshadowing a time when Norwegian coins would be minted under the authority of a Danish king. From the late 14th century, Norway's history, and therefore its coinage, became deeply intertwined with Denmark's. In 1397, the Kalmar Union brought the crowns of Denmark, Norway, and Sweden together under a single monarch. Although Sweden eventually broke away, Norway remained in a union with Denmark for over 400 years. This political reality had a profound impact on its money. For long periods, no distinct Norwegian coins were minted at all. The Danish currency became the standard currency used in Norway, and the economic and political power was firmly centralized in Copenhagen. The money in a Norwegian merchant's purse was Danish money, a daily reminder of where the real power lay. When separate coins for Norway were eventually reintroduced, they were produced under the authority of the Danish king. The designs clearly reflected this Danish dominance. The coins would often feature the portrait of the reigning Danish-Norwegian king, such as Christian IV, who was a prolific builder and modernizer. The reverse side of the coins might feature the Norwegian lion holding an axe, the traditional coat of arms of Norway, but the overall look and feel were part of the broader Danish monetary system. This was a way for the crown to acknowledge Norway's status as a separate kingdom while keeping it firmly within the Danish economic sphere. The coins were Norwegian in name but Danish in command. A major development during this era was the introduction of a large, impressive silver coin called the speciedollar. This coin was Norway's version of the famous thaler, a large silver coin used all over Europe. The speciedollar was the cornerstone of the monetary system from the 16th century onwards. It was a heavy, reliable coin with a high silver content, making it popular for large transactions and international trade. Smaller denominations like the mark and the skilling were also minted for everyday use. For the first time, Norway had a structured system of different coin values, from the mighty specie down to small copper skillings, all bearing the mark of the Danish-Norwegian monarchy. This system remained in place until the end of the Napoleonic Wars. In 1814, as a consequence of Denmark-Norway having sided with the defeated Napoleon, Norway was handed over to Sweden. This marked the end of the 400-year-long union with Denmark and the beginning of a new one with its other Scandinavian neighbor. This political shift would in time bring about another fundamental change in Norway's currency. The era of Danish-influenced specie dollars was drawing to a close, and a new chapter in Norwegian numismatic history was about to begin, one that would eventually lead to the creation of the currency Norway still uses today. The union with Sweden, which began in 1814, set the stage for the most significant monetary reform in Norway's history. For the first few decades of the union, Norway continued to use the specie dollar. Although now under a Swedish king, Norway had its own constitution and, a greater degree of autonomy than it had under Denmark. This was reflected in its coins, which now featured the portrait of the Swedish-Norwegian king but were clearly marked as Norwegian. However, by the mid-19th century, economies across Europe were modernizing, and many were looking to adopt the gold standard, which linked a currency's value directly to a fixed amount of gold. The old silver-based specie dollar system was becoming outdated. In 1875, a landmark decision was made. Norway, along with Denmark and Sweden, formed the Scandinavian Monetary Union. This was a remarkable act of cooperation between the three nations. The goal was to create a stable and modern monetary system that would make trade between them easier. The Union Treaty stipulated that all three countries would adopt a new currency based on the gold standard. This new currency was to be called the krone in Norway and Denmark, and krona in Sweden, which simply means crown. The new krone was set to a value where 2,480 kroner were equal to 1 kilogram of pure gold, creating a fixed and reliable exchange rate between the member countries. The introduction of the krone meant the end of the centuries-old specie dollar. The new system was decimal-based, which was much simpler for calculations. 1 krone was divided into 100 ore. New coins were issued in denominations of ore and kroner. For the first time, Norway minted beautiful gold coins, in values of 10 and 20 kroner. These weren't really for everyday circulation, but served as the gold reserve that guaranteed the value of the paper money and other coins. More common were the silver coins, such as the 1 and 2 kroner pieces, and bronze and copper coins for the smaller ore denominations. The designs featured the Norwegian lion on one side and the coin's value on the other, often with the king's monogram. Although Norway was still in a union with Sweden, the Scandinavian Monetary Union allowed it to have a currency that was equal in value and status to that of its neighbors. A Danish, Swedish, or Norwegian krone was legal tender in all three countries. You could take a Norwegian 1 krone coin and spend it in Stockholm or Copenhagen without any issue. This practical arrangement lasted for decades and was a great success, fostering close economic ties across Scandinavia. The union formally ended with the outbreak of the First World War in 1914, as the gold standard was abandoned, but the legacy of the krone endured. All three countries decided to keep the name for their respective national currencies, a name that continues to this day. The year 1905 was a momentous one for Norway. After a peaceful and negotiated separation, the union with Sweden was dissolved, and Norway became a fully independent nation for the first time in over 500 years. The country chose to remain a monarchy, inviting a Danish prince to become their new king. He took the Old Norse name Håkon VII, connecting his new reign to Norway's medieval kings. This newfound independence sparked a wave of national pride, and one of the most visible ways to express this was through a redesign of the nation's coins. The money in people's pockets needed to look and feel truly Norwegian, free from the symbols of foreign rulers. The first coins of independent Norway were a powerful expression of this new national identity. The monogram of the Swedish king was gone, replaced by the monogram of King Håkon VII. More importantly, the portrait of the king himself soon began to appear on the higher value coins. The design of these coins, created by the artist Joe Visdal, was celebrated for its strong and dignified style. The portrait of King Håkon VII, facing right, became a symbol of the new, modern, and independent Norwegian state. On the reverse, the traditional Norwegian coat of arms, the lion with the axe, was often prominently displayed, surrounded by the chain of the Order of St. Olav, Norway's highest honor. The metals used for the coins also reflected the traditions established under the Scandinavian monetary union. The smaller denominations, the 1, 2, and 5 ore coins, were struck in bronze. The middle values like the 10, 25, and 50 ore were made from a copper-nickel alloy, which gave them a silvery appearance. The larger 1 and 2 kroner coins were minted in silver, continuing the long tradition of precious metal coinage for higher values. These coins were not just for buying goods, they were symbols of stability and sovereignty. Every coin was a small piece of Norwegian independence, circulating throughout the country and reinforcing the reality of self-rule. This new coinage system remained largely unchanged for the first few decades of the 20th century. It was a period of stability and nation-building, and the coins reflected that. They were practical, well-designed, and carried symbols that every Norwegian could recognize and feel proud of. They told a simple story. Norway was its own master now. The face on the coin was that of Norway's own king, chosen by its own people. This strong numismatic identity would soon be put to the ultimate test, as the clouds of war gathered over Europe, threatening the very independence that these coins celebrated. The period of the Second World War brought drastic changes to every aspect of life in Norway, including its coinage. In April 1940, Nazi Germany invaded and occupied the country. King Haakon VII and the legitimate government fled to London, where they formed a government in exile and continued the fight. Back in Norway, the German occupiers installed a collaborationist puppet government. One of the first things the new regime did was to change the country's coins. The portrait of King Haakon VII was a powerful symbol of resistance and the legitimate Norwegian state, so it had to be removed from circulation immediately. To replace the royal coinage, the occupying authorities issued new coins with designs that stripped away all symbols of Norwegian independence and the monarchy. The king's portrait and monogram were gone. The Norwegian coat of arms was altered, with the crown that sits atop the shield being removed. This was a deliberate act to delegitimize the monarchy. The new coins were purely functional and ideological. The designs were stark and simple, often featuring the altered coat of arms on one side and the denomination on the other. They were a constant metallic reminder to the Norwegian people of who was now in control. The war also created severe shortages of important metals. Copper and nickel were vital for the German war machine, used for making shell casings and other military equipment. As a result, these metals could no longer be used for minting coins. The occupying authorities had to find cheap and readily available substitutes. The copper-nickel coins were replaced with coins made of zinc, and the bronze coins were replaced with iron. These war coins felt different in the hand. They were lighter, corroded easily, and had a dull, lifeless appearance compared to the silver and bronze coins they replaced. They were a physical manifestation of the hardship and scarcity of the occupation years. For the Norwegian people, the pre-war coins featuring King Haakon VII became treasured keepsakes and symbols of hope. Possessing them was a small act of defiance against the occupiers. They were a reminder of the real Norway and the promise of a future liberation. When the war finally ended in 1945 and King Haakon VII returned to a jubilant nation, one of the first priorities was to restore the legitimate currency. The zinc and iron occupation coins were quickly withdrawn from circulation and replaced with the familiar pre-war designs bearing the king's portrait. The return of the king's face on the money signaled that Norway was free once more. After the liberation in 1945, Norway began the long process of rebuilding its economy and society. The country's coinage returned to its pre-war designs, with the portrait of the beloved King Haakon VII once again gracing the kroner coins. This provided a sense of continuity and stability during a challenging period of recovery. However, the economic realities of the post-war world meant that some changes were unavoidable. The cost of metals had risen, and the days of minting circulating coins from pure silver were over for good. From 1951, all new Norwegian coins, including the krone denominations, were made from a copper-nickel alloy, a practical and durable metal that is still used today. In 1957, King Haakon VII passed away after a remarkable 52-year reign. His son succeeded him, becoming King Olav V. This change of monarch required a complete redesign of the coinage. A new portrait, featuring King Olav V, was created for the 1, 2, and 5 kroner coins. This new series, introduced from 1958, became a familiar sight for Norwegians for over 3 decades. The design was clean and modern, yet it maintained the tradition of featuring the reigning monarch's portrait. On the reverse, the designs often incorporated elements of Norwegian art and nature, such as the image of a horse on the 5 kroner coin, linking the currency to the nation's broader cultural heritage. As the decades passed, inflation and changing economic needs led to further adjustments in the coinage system. The smallest denominations, the 1 and 2 ore coins, had lost most of their purchasing power and were becoming more expensive to produce than they were worth. They were withdrawn from circulation in 1972. The 5 and 25 ore coins followed in the 1980s, and the 50 ore was finally discontinued in 2012, marking the end of the ore as a physical coin. This streamlining of the currency reflected a modern economy where smaller transactions were increasingly handled electronically. The denominations were simplified to just 1, 5, 10, and 20 kroner coins. The death of King Olav V in 1991 brought his son, Harald V, to the throne. This once again necessitated a new generation of coins. The introduction of coins featuring the portrait of King Harald V coincided with a major redesign of the entire coin series. This was an opportunity to create a completely new and modern look for Norway's currency, one that would carry the nation into the 21st century. The resulting series, introduced in the mid-1990s, is the one that Norwegians use today, and it represents another chapter in the long and fascinating story of the country's money, blending royal tradition with contemporary design. The coins we use in Norway today, which first came out in the mid-1990s, show a modern country that's proud of its long history. The coins you'll find in your pocket are the 1, 5, 10, and 20 kroner pieces. A cool thing about these coins is how they smartly separate their themes. The 1 and 5 kroner coins focus on Norway's culture and old traditions, while the 10 and 20 kroner coins are all about the royal family. This way, the money celebrates different parts of what it means to be Norwegian. These coins aren't just for buying things, they also tell a story about being Norwegian. The 1 krone coin is special because it has a big hole in the middle, which makes it easy to spot and feel. The design on it is inspired by Norwegian folk art, with a fancy bird pattern taken from decorations on an old wooden church. The 5 kroner coin, which also has a hole in the middle, is decorated with leaf patterns. This design comes from the detailed wood carvings of the Norwegian artist Ole Moen, connecting the coin to a long history of skilled work in Norway. These coins celebrate Norway's artistic side, the creativity that has grown in its towns and valleys for hundreds of years. The coins with higher values feature the royal family. The 10 kroner coin has a simple modern picture of our current king, King Harald V. The design is neat and simple, showing a modern and approachable royal family. The other side shows the roof of a traditional wooden church, linking the king to Norway's deep Christian and architectural past. The biggest coin, the 20 kroner piece, has a more formal picture of King Harald V. The back of this coin is especially interesting because it shows a cool drawing of a Viking longship, bringing the story of Norwegian coins full circle. It's a strong nod to the seafaring ancestors who first brought silver to Norway. Today, these 4 coins make up the money used in a rich and modern country. They are made of strong copper nickel and nickel brass metals designed to last for many years. From the first silver coins of Olaf Tryggvason to the modern-themed coins of today, Norway's money has told the story of its people. It has shown its fights for freedom, its connections with its neighbors, the power of its kings, and the richness of its culture. The coins in a Norwegian's hand today are more than just money. They are a 1,000-year-old story made of metal, a real link to the Vikings, kings, and artists who shaped the nation.